Welcome to the Software People Stories. I'm Shiv.
I'm Chitra.
And I'm Gayatri.
We bring you interesting, untold stories of people
Associated with the creation
Or consumption of software-based solutions.
You'll hear stories of what worked,
and sometimes what didn't,
you will also hear very personal experiences.
and insights that would trigger your thoughts.
And inspire you to do even greater things.
In this episode, my co-host Gayatri continues a conversation with Dan Balcauski, founder and chief pricing officer at Product Tranquility, a company that helps high-volume B2B SaaS CEOs define pricing and packaging for new products. Gayatri asked him what challenges he faced when he became a consultant. Before answering that, Dan shares how he did a solo backpacking around the world trip and the transformational experiences he got from that, and how he had to talk himself away from the self-talk that would shoot any ideas for entrepreneurship. Wanting to explore a brain for hire kind of a model to see if he could sell his expertise and raising the bar by challenging himself to doing something different and more, and identifying and validating the niche that he wanted to be in, that of a SaaS pricing advisory. He also shares why he did not consider a model of being a fractional product manager role as a consultant. He shares some of the inflection points in his career over the years and how he has been able to support global clients remotely. And finally, his advice for young professionals who want to take up product management as a career. Listen on.
So Dan, let me ask this, what kind of a challenges did you have when you had to start becoming a consultant? I mean, leaving a cushy job, leaving a nice job, right? It is not easy. How did you make that happen? How did you make the decision?
Well, this could be an entire conversation on its own. I'll try to keep it relatively short. So before I started my company, this was pre-COVID times. I'd left my previous firm and I was traveling around the world. I did a solo backpacking expedition for a year and a half, completely around the world. Started in Fiji and New Zealand, and ended with 7 months in South America. Went entirely around the globe. And so during that time, it was a very transformational set of experiences in multiple dimensions. And a lot of time when you're sitting there on a long plane or bus ride, sitting on the top of a mountain, staring off at the beautiful horizon, you're like, well, what do I want to do with my life? And I'd always had this idea that I would start a business. And as a product leader, I was like, well, I'm going to start a software company. One thing I know about myself is I'm a little too pragmatic and deliberative. And what I would mean by that is, I'm very good at shooting holes in even my own ideas, let alone other people's ideas. And so I feel like for the software product entrepreneur, like you are in a position where you need to will something into existence that everyone is telling you is a terrible idea. Oh, Microsoft will just build that, or Google will build it, and that's dumb. Why would anybody want that? And you've got to face that for years. And I find that I kill my own ideas with that kind of self-talk. So I never found an idea of myself that I was passionate about. But one thing I was confident in was myself. I was like, look, I'm confident I can do something. So let me go try to sell my services as a brain for rent, right? And that's what kind of consultants are, in a nutshell. And look, it wasn't an easy start. I don't know if it ever gets easy. There's still challenges, every stage, right? It's akin to playing a video game. You play level 1 and that was hard, and you win level 1, you get to level 2 and level 2 is harder, right? So, it's not like you get to level 2 and you're like, oh, well, now I just, that's not an interesting video game, right? It just keeps on, you're just taking on bigger and bigger challenges, right? So I don't think it's easy, right? Because you're always kind of pushing to the next goal, to the next level. But But I think, one thing is, over time, my focus did shift. I didn't start, purely focused on pricing and packaging. That's all I focus on now. I focused early on. I had a broader umbrella, kind of think of more of a fractional chief product officer. Pricing and packaging was one of the areas that I, messaged and said, hey, I can help with this, among, many other things. But just over time in talking to the market, doing a lot of research, realized that a lot of companies were really struggling with this area specifically, and just decided ultimately, if I want to become one of the world's leading experts in this, in anything, I'm going to have to pick a lane. And so it was an interesting lane to me for a whole series of reasons. Obviously I had some background experience in, but like anything else, right? When you get into it, you think you know a lot, and then you start getting even further and you're like, oh my God, I didn't know anything. It's your question earlier was definitely appropriate, right? Until you pick a lane, right? I think you assume that you know a lot more than people, than you think. I had a client who, they told me, they were like, look, I thought I knew a lot about pricing and packaging, and then I started working with you and I realized I knew nothing. And I was like, yeah, like I went through the same transition, But we get them there. Right? We don't want them to stay there. We get up to the mountaintop. But yeah, so that's how it evolved for me.
Wow, fantastic. And it's always hard to start something new and create something for yourself, as well as know that that's your legacy, right? This is very personal.
Oh, I don't think about anything as so grand as legacy.
Okay, you don't. Because I look at your website and I also see all these podcasts that you've done. I love the content that you've created, honestly, Dan. I think maybe that is me talking in the evening after a long day. That I feel that's a legacy in terms of what you've created, and create that sort of a model that will work for others. Because you don't necessarily have to work for somebody, or neither do you have to create your own firm with thousands of people. That this is something that consulting and being available for hire is a very good one. But I'm surprised that you didn't go through the fractional CXO role, Dan. Did you even consider that, or it was too hard for you? It wasn't of interest.
Yeah, no, I started that direction. So I think, if I look at, when I got back from my travels and decided I was going to jump into the consulting role, I thought in terms of fractional chief product officer. And, that was, there was a couple of assumptions there, because I had friends who were fractional chief marketing officers. I had friends who were fractional chief financial officers. And I saw that it was a viable model, and I saw very few people doing a fractional chief product officer type model. So, the product person in me said, either this is a golden opportunity or it's a terrible idea. I'm going to go find out which it is. And the only way to verify that in the market is to go try and do it. I found out it's generally a terrible idea. There's a reason most people are not doing a fractional chief product officer role, especially in the technology industry. It may work in maybe non-tech. And this is a longer conversation, but I think the nut of the argument rests on the fact that, like, if we think about the role of product management is a relatively new function. Let's say it's 3-4 decades old. I believe, from the lore, it was started by Microsoft. And Microsoft didn't invent the idea. They took inspiration from the consumer packaged goods, Unilever, Procter & Gamble, Reckitt Benckiser, those type of companies. And those companies for years had the concept of a brand manager. So if you think about the CPG companies, the core asset of the companies is the brand. It's not really the product. The brand is the core asset. And so the brand manager is one of the internal person responsible in the company for managing the core asset of the business. In a technology company, The product manager is managing the core asset of that business, the product. So it is the difference between CPG and technology and how that role changes. And so I think fundamentally a fractional chief product officer, I'm not saying it's impossible, and I wish anyone better luck than I had in trying to pull that off. But I think there's a distinct reason why you don't see that at the level you see fractional chief legal counsel, fractional CMO, fractional CFO roles on the product side, is because having, that's such a core asset of the business that you really need someone full-time internal to be the walking personification of that.
Yeah, I actually see what you're saying, because product, to that extent, it's a core. It's not something that you can fractionalize it, and if you're doing that, then maybe that's not the business that you want to be in. And and it also leads to your own brand awareness and ability to research. How much to research will be up to the product team, and if you make it product fractional, it sort of loses its value, so to speak. I get what you're saying, Dan. So when we talk about product pricing as well as the whole fractionalism, if you will, is one of the side questions that I have is, I I hear what you're saying in terms of you gone for a worldwide trip and took a decision there. Uh, what has been the other inflection points in your career then, that you are okay to share for our listeners?
I think we've touched on a couple of them, right? Was I think there was one major inflection point when I realized, at that other company, pre-business school, that ultimately I was interested in leaving the engineering world behind and focusing more on the product world, or the value creation side. I think that was a key inflection point. I think another inflection point was, I had a mentor, and he gives talks around the world on product strategy and being a product leader, and he had a whole presentation that he had given on how to manage your product career. And one of the things that he talked through was, he had this dream of being CEO eventually. And at one point he had talked to a mentor, and his mentor asked him, look, given, your strengths, do you really want to be CEO? Because this is what it's going to take, and this is what you say your interests and strengths are. And he took a hard look and he said, no, actually I don't. I would much be happier being the, second in command, chief product officer, VP of product, and now he's a product, thought leader, and teaches, product strategy workshops, etc. But realize that CEO role's not for me. And so I think, that had a very impact. It had a lot of impact on me, because it made me, I think, for better or worse, right? I think we all kind of if we join a corporate job out of school, you sort of look up the ladder and you're like, well, I guess I'm climbing up this ladder, and what's at the top of the ladder, right? Even if it's not an explicit decision, you're like, well, I guess I get, continue to do well and get promoted, and eventually somehow, even, it's sort of in the water, even if maybe that's more of an American thing. I don't know if that's cross-cultural, but, especially for, I think there's, a lot of my peers, I went to business school, right? I think it's an explicit destination for them. And in fact, I know it is, because some of them have told me, and some of them are in those CEO roles now. But for me, I realized that wasn't my, being CEO of a large company wasn't, my ideal path either, right? And so I think that freed me from a thought pattern as well, right? And that happened, prior to that around the world trip, so that, as I was exploring what would be, possible avenues forward, it was like, I could put, it didn't answer the question, but it allowed me to put aside, a lot of noise, we'll say.
Yeah. And it's also setting an expectation on what you want to do. Sometimes that sort of frees you to say what is it that I want to do, and it also helps saying that what is it that I don't want to do. That, that's very deep. That I also like the fact that you gave yourself room to understand what you like, starting from software and saying, hey, these are things that I can do but I don't want to do, and these are my interests. And skilling yourself, creating expertise. So when you doing all this, right, what has location strategy been done, as a being a product and a pricing per expert? Are you really doing so much of travel across the globe, or not for personal reason but for professional reason? What is that location played a strategy for you? You're in Austin, Texas, right?
No, I would say, yeah, I'm in Austin, Texas. I would say that, if there is a silver lining to the COVID-19 pandemic, it was the fact that everyone went remote and all expectation of travel was just thrown out the window. I was lucky. So, just, I guess, context setting, I came back from my travels that we discussed at it was basically 4 years ago. So it was beginning of July of 2019. So let's say, the first month I was catching up on a year and a half of mail that I hadn't looked at, and getting, different other life things reset up, getting my car re-registered and stuff like that. And then, kind of in earnest, probably almost exactly 4 years ago of August of 2019, getting the company, kind of going of like, okay, this is what I'm going to go out and try to do. And I was lucky. I landed a couple of clients in relatively short order. And those, one was remote off the bat and one was based in Austin. And then fast forward, not very long, but about 3-4 months later, and all of a sudden we're in full lockdown because of COVID. And then, so a lot of the, from the nascent aspects of the business, it was either local or then, it was like I had clients in, Central Europe, in the UK, in Canada, West Coast Canada, East Coast of the US, West Coast of the US. And there was no expectation from any of them that I would ever travel because they didn't even have anywhere for me to travel to. It'd be like, oh yeah, we're based in Vancouver, but if you show up in Vancouver, like nobody's going to be in an office because everyone's at home. And then it's been very similar since. So which is fine. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily be opposed to travel, but it's also not an expectation. And I don't think the work that we do. There's a couple of things I think benefit from being in the same room as somebody, but I would say for the most part, we are able to get the work we need to get done perfectly fine in a remote environment.
Yeah, and the whole working in the office by itself needs to be done only when there is really touch time of your minds, and you don't need that sort of a thing more and more. You need the more and more of understanding of where you are aligned towards, and ensuring that that happens, right. Very true. The part where we are all learning new ways of living, working, right? I think very well said, Dan. I know we are close to the completion, and I want to ask this question: if you wanted to share some, advice for young people in software, or thinking of moving into the product world, what would be your few advices so that they can learn from your journey?
Oh man, well there's a lot out there. There's a lot of learnings to be had. I teach a product strategy course for Kellogg through their executive education program. Been doing that for a couple of years, and so I see a lot of nascent budding product managers. We get quite a good distribution of people who are just have never done product management before, and people have been doing it for decades, maybe had no formalized training in doing it. I would say the number one thing, if I had a billboard for any product manager, it's like, don't be afraid and just go talk to your customers. Like there's nothing else to be said there. Just, if you're not talking to your customers, you're not really doing your job. And I mean, there's a lot of nuance there of how do you set the processes and what do you ask, et cetera. But if you're just sitting behind an analytics dashboard looking at numbers, you're not really doing the real work of product management, because nobody else at the company is in a position to get the real deep insights on the customer's pain that you are, if you go have sort of in-depth conversations, because their guards are down. You're not trying to sell them anything. They're not angry because they're in a support situation. You can have a very deep level of conversation around the context that they're in, their daily struggles, what else is going on in their environment, how they, their perceptions of your company, et cetera. I would say the other thing is start learning about pricing. There's very little formal training out there. A couple of books I can recommend if folks are interested, but I think it's a valuable skill. I think one of the thing about that product strategy course, one of the I think more challenging sections or assignments that we have is we talk about a business model case. We in the specifics of the case, it's like a razor blades business model, and going through a unit level profit and loss model. We find a lot of product managers have never actually had to work through the financials of a company. And they spend a lot of their time in Jira writing user stories and are experts at writing user stories and acceptance criteria. But look, as you go up the ranks, like, your executives don't talk in Jira. They talk in dollars and cents. How is this thing going to make me money? And so, pricing is a great way to force yourself into that world of like, hey, I'm asking the engineers to write this code. It's going to result in this feature. It's going to affect this customer's life somehow. How much are they willing to pay for that? How much money can we get? How many of those customers are out there that are willing to pay that? So what is that going to mean in terms of the revenue? What is that going to mean in terms of the cost of the business? Because ultimately, that's the question your CEO wants to get answered. He's like, yeah, these features, okay, a roadmap slide, I get it. Like, what is this good? Like, I'm investing tens of millions of dollars in R&D every year. What is going to be my return? And I just feel like, for all of the good product management and courses and books out there, too few are spent on really training product people to really speak effectively to their CEO, CFO, to the board, right? Because of that lack. So
Very, very well put, Dan. In fact, I use this term I coach product owners in my field, right? So I actually tell the product management team, think of each sprint as $20,000, which is going out of your pocket. What is the most valuable thing that you will buy in that? That sort of opens their mind. Oh, that's how to think about it. They used to think, oh, I had to just write user stories. I had to just prioritize because Gayatri asked me to do it. So that's very, very well done, Dan. I think I love it. It's not about Jira. It's not about how well it is written, but knowing your customers, go in front of the customer.
I'll say one more point. And I think this is a point of encouragement, is that, yes, go study all of, read the Marty Kagan books, read the, go take the product management courses, read the pricing books. That said, the real world is way messier than the books and articles make it seem. So do not get discouraged if you read these things and then you're like, well, yeah, but, okay, but we've got all these like edge cases and stuff. So, tying our whole conversation back together, this is where, the kind of the real world of learning from, clients is like, oh, you guys do it this way, or you have this constraint. Okay, that constraint that breaks this part of the model. Okay, so then how do we sort of work around that specific kind of constraint because of an industry, right? We'll be talking about so regulated environment or something like that. So but don't be discouraged. Like, no book or blog post is ever written with guidance that is going to take every situation and nuance into account. And so do not be discouraged when you see those things and then try to apply them and they don't work out exactly as expected. That is the expected outcome, but then you kind of learn and adapt and go forward from there.
Very well put. Keep learning, keep adapting, and stay true to the customers. Lovely, Dan. Thank you so much for your time. And I feel like, I have got a fastest product understanding as well as pricing that I can get. in less than 40 minutes. Wonderful, Dave. Thank you so much for your time for Software People Stories.
Thank you for having me.
We thank Siddharth for the music and Anita for promoting the Software People Stories.
If you like this episode,
Please subscribe on your favorite podcast client.
And spread the word in your network.
if you'd like to share your story,
Contact us at podcasts@pm-powerconsulting.com.